because their data was going
Their
and Tisha
data
wasn't
was
coming.
And when they put data for that day. Now, if the teacher was around, again, would they have switched off the data? Stop being economizers.
Okay. Yes. Good morning. We are very sorry for the delay because there was too much rain, but all the same, better late than never. Now, you remember the other time we looked at the impact of the Ethiopian crisis on the rise and growth of African nationalism. So today, if you look at your work, we are on page 52. Page 52. So you go to page 52, and there is a subheading there, the career of Haile Selassie. That is his leadership from 1930 to 1974. So we should know Haile Selassie ruled that time. Haile Selassie. Now, Haile Selassie had two regimes. He came to power in 1930, then ruled up to, that one should take notes, then ruled up to 1935. This is when the Ethiopian crisis came. This is up to 1941. There was a break. There was a break of Haile Selassie. Now, he ruled for 5 years before Benito Mussolini attacked Ethiopia. So he was crowned in power 1930, then those 5 years. Then from here, Mussolini came in. That's the Ethiopian crisis we have already looked at. We looked at its causes, we looked at its impact. Then this is a brief Haile Selassie in exile. Now, he came back in 1941, then ruled up 1974. So you should know that kind of Haile Selassie leadership from 1941 up 1974. So you should take note of that. That is after he came back from exile, then he ruled. We shall see him at the end or towards the end of his regime. He was overthrown in a coup d'etat because of some weaknesses that he had. So take note of that. When Mussolini, by the time Mussolini came, he had just ruled for 5 years. So as you go through, take note of that kind of administration that Haile Selassie had in him. So from here, so when you go down and look at our backgrounds there, the background, who was Haile Selassie, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, was born on July 23rd, 1892, to Ras Makonnen, a cousin brother of Emperor Menelik. Menelik, those who do paper 6, go in the details of Menelik. Menelik was one of, that's the guy who was there in 1896 Battle of Adwa. It's the one who defeated the Italians. Italians had wanted to colonize Ethiopia during that time, and that was the leader, Menelik II. So this is the guy who defeated the Italians in the Battle of Adwa. That is one of the causes why Haile Selassie was attacked. So, by Menelik, he was born in the province of Harara and was the 223 active successor of the Solomonic dynasty, of the descendants of King Solomon. So he has blood relationship with the Queen of Sheba. He went to school at the early age of 5 years, and by 1899, he had started learning French and English. That background is there. Haile Selassie was a man of remarkable mental abilities and exceptional talent. This brought him to stately appointment. There's a correction there. You add the word meant, appointment. You read appointment. State to a stately, not appoint. Make sure you make correction there. To a stately appointment at the early age of 14 years as governor of Arete in Harara province, where he was born. At the age of 24, he became a regent of the realm, that is the empire, became the Ras, there's the S missing, Ras means some Amharic term, which means governor. He became the Rastafari. He became the Rastafari. S is missing. Do make that correction on that word. Full stop. He also became the crown prince, or the next or king of kings after while Empress Zeditu, the daughter of Menelik II. The real name, his real names, Emperor Haile Selassie are not the real names, but he was known as, his real names are, however, Rastafari Dizimachi Makonnen. Those were the original names. He was crowned emperor on November 2nd, 1930. And that's what we talked about, crowned emperor. Now he becomes the leader. He was crowned the emperor on 2nd, 1830, with the most popular style, with the most popular style and gained the title of Imperial Majesty. That's Haile Selassie, meaning Haile Selassie means the power of Trinity. So he was a very strong Christian. The titles adopted by Emperor Selassie, they had the King of Kings, the Conquering of Lion of Judah. Those are all. Now that's the kind of background we are very much interested. If you start any question on Haile Selassie, you have to make sure you give us the background of who Haile Selassie was. So in any of those things that when you're answering any question on Haile Selassie, we need to know at least when was he born, what were his original names. Just give us a background. Don't simply start writing any question about Haile Selassie. So briefly, that's the background of Haile Selassie. Now let's go down and look at what Haile Selassie. When you are looking at Haile Selassie achievement, this time of when he became in 1930, when he was crowned up the Italian, Benito Mussolini's invasion. This period of 5 years, he had just not made much, achievement that he had not made so much impact. So our achievements of Haile Selassie, that's what we are going to. We basically look at this long time when he came back from exile. So when he came back from exile, up 1970 what? Up 1974. That's where we shall get our achievements. Of the achievements. So let's go down there and look at the Emperor Haile Selassie's achievements. Now, Emperor Haile Selassie was deposed from his throne. That's 1936. That one we know, from Ethiopia, succumbed to the Italian defeat. However, in 1941, the combined force of Indians, so it's not only the Ethiopian that fought, so it was a combination. Other people came in and helped. So in 1941, a combined force of Indians, Ethiopians, the British forces, of the king, that's the African rifle. It was known as King African Rifle, that Ethiopians defeated the Italian imperial administration. Ethiopians, another thing you should also know, that Ethiopians used the force. We have been talking about it. It was not a simple walk away of Italians from Ethiopia. We talked about the Black Lions. So there was a movement, the Black Lions. We talked about them. So the Black Lions, with the assistance of Indians, with the assistance of the British, Italy, Mussolini was forced out of Ethiopia in 1941. Don't simply see one. So this enabled Haile Selassie to retain. He came back. That's 1941. His throne. He was bestowed with the title of the Lion of the Tribe of Judah. And upon his return, Emperor Haile Selassie scored a number of achievements during his reign. So basically, this time is long enough. When you look at achievements, we basically look at on his return back to Ethiopia up 1974. There's a lot this man did for people of Ethiopia. So our interest, when you look at these different regimes that he ruled, this was so short a period that we don't normally get so much out of it as far as achievements and failures. So our target is this period, the last part of his leadership. They are guiding questions. And in fact, this one made him to be referred as a man or a modernizer. So sometimes they can ask a question and say, to what extent was Emperor Haile Selassie a modernizer between 1941 or from, they can say from 1941 and they keep quiet. And the question does not mention this. Just get to know they are talking about this period. To what extent was Emperor Haile Selassie a modernizer in the history of Ethiopia from 1941, even if we have not put in the 1974, just get to know that this is last part of leadership. In what? His achievements included the following. The guiding questions, of course, as we always do. Let's look at that question, reference questions. Assess the achievements of Emperor Haile Selassie. Questions of assess are two-sided. That one you should keep in mind. Two-sided and even calls for standing point. So in other words, that question is calling for achievements and failures. If the achievements are more than the failures, according to you, what you're going to answer, and when you answer the question, you're going to write more achievements on your plan. Therefore, you are right to say, to a greater extent, he did achievements. If the failures are more than achievements, you are right to say to a lesser extent, if you're going to start with the achievements and you have fewer achievements than what? The failures. You're free to say to a lesser extent, you had achievements. Then you mention, then you say, however, to a larger extent. So this is not a question that carries a stem. Let me hope you're differentiating the questions of the stem. There's no stem in this question. But what do you have, you as a candidate? Do you have more achievements? Do you have fewer achievements? If they are fewer, and you're going to start with them to a lesser extent. Then if you are going to end with the failures, which are more on your plan, then to a greater extent. So that is a two-sided question. Then there's one there, down B. How successful was the Emperor Haile Selassie? Let me hope as we talk about these points, you are taking note, putting that word two-sided, calls for standpoint. Then i.e. achievements and failures. So that when you are revising alone there, you get to know what the question calls for. Then there is B. How successful was Emperor Haile Selassie's reign? Reign means regime or leadership. Between 1940, you get the years. That's why they are talking about between 1941. Between 1941 up 1957. So you should take note of that as you talk about 1941 to 1974. That's why they're talking about those years. You get the point. So that's why they're talking about those years. How successful questions are also two-sided, even if it doesn't have how far. So you should also take note of that. How successful questions, whether in your paper 3 or paper 1, are two-sided. How successful, whenever you come across questions, how successful, you should always also give the failures. And the question also calls for standing point, whether in nationalism, whether in Europe. So that question also is calling for achievements and failures of Selassie. C, there's another guiding question there. C, examine the changes introduced by Emperor Haile Selassie. Examine is two-sided changes. Examine the changes. Some of these changes were positive, others the change can be negative or positive. That's why it is also two-sided. So the changes that he brought that were positive, those ones will bring the achievements. Then you say, however, to a lesser extent, he also had negative changes. So we move like that. So those are guiding questions there. So you should take note of that. Now, that first point is there. Immediately after his coronation, coronation is to go on the throne. Immediately he was reinstated. Remember, coming back from exile 1941. So immediately after his coronation, Emperor Haile Selassie introduced a constitutional decree that transformed Ethiopia into. No, now when immediately after his coronation, we are talking about 1930. We can trace there are some other things that he did right from 1930, because remember those two stages. 1930 before the coming in of Italians. So immediately after his coronation, coronation was 1930. So when you're tracing the achievements or failures of Haile Selassie, you're free to start from this, even 5 years. Some achievements were listed in the 5 years of his leadership. So the first point is relating to the 5 years. So immediately after his coronation, Emperor Haile Selassie introduced a constitutional decree that transformed Ethiopia into a constitutional monarchy. That means the other leaders, other kings, we had Menelik II, we had John the Fourth. Those are previous leaders. There was Theodore, those who do paper sticks. Talk about them. These are the ones. Then later on, Haile Selassie ruled. These ones ruled. This one ruled the first. Then this one. Then this one. Then this one. So other leaders, that is the other kings in Ethiopia, for them they had ruled minus a constitution. That one should take note of that. So they had ruled minus a constitution. So immediately when he came to the king, he introduced constitutional rule. That is, he introduced the constitution. That means these other previous kings, for them had ruled minus a constitution. So you should take note of that. Constitutional monarchy. The decree became the country's first written, so you can imagine, first written constitution. Unlike other kings who had ruled Ethiopia, that was a very big achievement of Haile Selassie. In more than 2,000 years, the constitution combined both the country's customs and the culture of the modern civilized and educated nations. The principal aim of the constitution was to bring together. You know, Ethiopians were divided on tribal lines. We talked even about it when you look at the reasons why Ethiopians were defeated. We talked about tribal lines. The Mahariki was the tribe of what? Of Emperor Haile Selassie, which was benefiting a lot during his regime. And we said other tribes were not happy, like the Gala. We had those other tribes like the Gala. We had those other tribes that were coming from the Ogaden. So a constitution binds all. This is now the most important thing that Haile Selassie got out of the constitution he introduced. This constitution was to bring all Ethiopians, because if there was a law put in place, it was to cut across all tribes. You know, Amharic was the tribe of Menelik, but now if there was a law and someone from the Amharic tribe had gone wrong, he could also be punished. So that is the statement that the constitution combined both the customs and the culture of the modern civilization and educated nations. The principal aim of the constitution was to bring together the people of Ethiopia as one family, united and controlled by one law, because the law was a law. It was not looking at which tribe one was coming from, and governed by the emperor, governed by one emperor. Now, the constitution itself brought order in country, and another thing, the constitution promoted unity, because the laws were uniform and were carried out on all tribes. That's the point. Haile Selassie was also hopeful of a new constitution would create a longer period of peace and prosperity in his empire after a series of wars and raids among different tribes. So there were those tribal wars, the tribal conflicts. Now, therefore, one can summarize and say, Haile Selassie introduced a constitution in Ethiopia, which had not been there for over 2,000 years. And this constitution brought all tribes in Ethiopia together. Therefore, it promoted unity, because the laws were applied to all. And all the Ethiopians the constitution put them or bound them under one king. That is one emperor, as was called. Point 2, achievement 2, that one we are done. He created. Now, in 19, I don't know whether above that point, using our notes, why don't, to put this point so that you understand it better, above that point, you put there, either in your pencil or the key ink or pencil, that he introduced a parliamentary system in Ethiopia. So that we'll get down to explain, because the way the point starts may not give you a clear picture. So up there, you put there, he introduced the parliamentary system. He introduced the parliamentary system. Above that point, you just write it there, he introduced parliamentary system in Ethiopia. He introduced parliamentary system in Ethiopia. Remember in our previous point, he introduced constitutional rule. He turned Ethiopia or Ethiopian monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. The other one is constitutional monarchy. He introduced constitution. Now we are going to the parliamentary system. Let's go down and see. So you put it there, the way you put that thing there, the way it starts may not give you a clear picture. So squeeze it up there. I understand there is space. Then you can say in 1955, the emperor revised a constitution that created a national assembly. National assembly is the parliament we are talking about. National assembly, an assembly that brings all Ethiopians together. Anything that is national simply talks about bringing the nationals of the country together. So national assembly, in our paper 3, you remember we talked about the National Assembly government. So National Assembly, so it means national means bringing all people together. So introduce the National Assembly comprising of 2 sections, the upper and lower chambers. Now this is the parliament you're talking about. It had 2 houses. You can call them chambers if you want. This is not a new term, I'm very sure, because we also used this in paper 3 when you're talking about the director government, the chamber of deputies, the chamber of elders. You remember, so it had 2 houses, the upper and lower chambers. The upper chamber comprised mainly of members of royal imperial family and close associates of Emperor Haile Selassie, while the lower chamber came to be known as the People's Parliament. So you hear, we are talking about parliamentary system, introduced parliamentary system in Ethiopia. So that's what we are talking about. That's why I told you, as you are starting at that point, you put that thing into this introduction of the parliamentary system. They revised the constitution, recognized the voting rights of Ethiopian people, which enabled them to vote for deputies. We can call them representatives of lower chamber. So in the lower chamber, the lower chamber or the lower house, there was voting. People had to be voted for, but the upper, you had to nominate from the security ballot. This modern move towards political empowerment of the grassroots masses was an expression of a great democracy. This one makes, hence, this makes Haile Selassie a modernizer. The question they have added there, the word, to what extent was Haile Selassie a modernizer? Hence making Haile Selassie a modernizer. So the point is okay, let's go to point 3. Point 3, Emperor Haile Selassie successfully established national unity in Ethiopia. Having a united Ethiopian kingdom was Haile Selassie's first achievement, as he believed that the power of unity would be protected by interests in which bind Ethiopians permanently together. He was therefore able to do what the great Ethiopian emperors like Menelik II, Theodore, or Johann, that is John's, John the Fourth, only dreamt about a unified. For them, they were just dreaming. The other previous emperors or kings of Ethiopia, for them, they had the dream about it. Now, who brought this dream into reality is this man. When he promoting. You remember all along Ethiopians had been divided along tribal lines, like we have already noted. So the struggle to create a united modern state was begun by Emperor Menelik. Though Menelik did not live long enough to see his efforts bear fruits, Haile Selassie recognized him by unveiling his statue during his coronation, crowning ceremonies. So he brought Ethiopians together. He led to unity. All those tribal differences had gone. Ethiopia also had religious differences. Some Ethiopians were Muslims, especially at this time. Eritrea was still part of Ethiopia. We shall look at the Eritrean War of Independence. We shall see how the Eritreans broke away. But initially, around this time of Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, which we know today as an independent country, was a mere province, and majority of the Eritreans that we know as a country today was a mere province of Ethiopia, and most of the Eritreans are Muslims. So he brought together people of different religions. He brought together people of different tribes. That's what was very important. Which other previous kings had failed or had just dreamt about. And fourth, he made a great contribution to the country by ensuring total abolition of slavery and feudalism in Ethiopian empire. Slavery and feudalism had been strong. So that's the time when there was slave trade. Slave trade was still there, was still taking place in Europe and also in Ethiopia. So this man tried to put a stop on it. It was during Haile Selassie's time that he put a stop, it fought. So feudalism had long, among the wars he fought in Ethiopia in his areas as a regent and later as an emperor, were mostly against the Ethiopian provincial governors who opposed the emperor's move to provide rights and freedom of poor communities in Ethiopia that were victims of oppression due to slavery and feudalism. He established the party. In other words, he led the stopping of slave trade in Ethiopia, as simple as that. He started the war against slave trade, that inhuman slave trade. So he started the war on it, and down there, they're telling us he also established a department and a school for freed slaves, those ones who were set free, those freed slaves, to rehabilitate them from the inferiority complex, of enslavement. So even he had rehabilitation centers where these people were being liberated from slavery or slave trade. We are told you are also human beings. You are human beings like other people. You have also to enjoy your rights. So that was a very good step Emperor Haile Selassie took. Next, Haile Selassie made efforts to modernize the education system of Ethiopia. He established schools and colleges in Addis Ababa and other provincial cities of the empire. He sent Ethiopian students to universities in England. So Ethiopian students could go abroad for further studies. So he could go to countries like England, others were sent to Egypt and France and Syria. And if you look at these countries that we are mentioning, these are the countries, if you remember in your O-level history, these are the countries which had where civilization started. Countries like Egypt, countries like Syria, countries like England. So he was taking Ethiopian students to countries which were centers of civilization, where education started. You get it? Where even industrialization started, where they got skills in different fields, and which skills they came back with and started developing Ethiopia. So ensuring France, this was aimed at ensuring modern planning of education in the country. Emperor Haile Selassie also upgraded the Tafari Makonnen Secondary School. By the way, this school came to be known as this school came to be known as Haile Selassie Secondary School. So it was called Tafari. It was upgraded. Upgrading means taking to another level. If it was the only teaching, for example, if the school has only this primary section, if you upgrade it, then you introduce secondary. You upgrading it. You can upgrade it by pushing it to O level. You have schools where there is only O level. Then another time you see the school can also introduce A level. That's what you call upgrading. So upgraded the Tafari Makonnen Secondary School that he founded in 1925 into a modern education facility. He recruited French and English teachers as instructors in the school. So he was sending Ethiopian students outside in France. He was also getting those experts, those French, Egyptian, British teachers, even to teach those ones in Ethiopia. That was a very big achievement this man did, especially in fighting what we call illiteracy in Ethiopia. So modern, hence making, if the question wanted to what extent was Haile Selassie a modernizer, hence making Haile Selassie a modernizer. Next there, consequently, the ambition of higher education enabled Emperor Haile. That's the continuation of the other point to do with his educational reforms, though here it is separated, because you see there is connection, because you're talking about the university. So he not only stop at secondary level, but we are seeing him even introducing the university. So Emperor Haile Selassie, even the university was called Haile Selassie University. He even allowed a section of his palace in Addis Ababa to accommodate some of the important departments of the university. So he moved further. This is a further explanation of the other first point. So much as it looks to be like a new point. So foreign professors and expatriates were recruited from France, Belgium, Britain, Sweden, to uplift the standard of university education in the country. This was a sign enough to show that Emperor Haile Selassie was not a conservative monarchical leader, but a modernizer. He modernized Ethiopia. When you look at those things that he was introducing in Ethiopia, we are looking at him getting in touch with civilized, with industrialized countries. When you talk about Belgium, talk about France, talk about Britain, and you are getting experts, the professors, the teachers from there. That was so great on the side of Emperor Haile Selassie. Emperor Haile Selassie modernized the health sector of the Ethiopian monarchy. He upgraded the Bethsaida, that's the hospital, upgrading. You understand the word now, upgrading. He upgraded there are some clinics where you go and get medicine, just tabs, injections, where they don't carry out operations. You go there, they will refer you to another level. If you go to a particular clinic, they simply give you tablets, can give you some injections. They check blood, whether you have. Now, upgrading. Then there are those ones they will say, oh, I need to step behind. Then we for further treatment. Then another one, they can say, here we even cut out operation. We can, for example, if you have a disease that needs to, rather a problem that it needs to be operated upon, then they say, so that's upgrading. So now this small hospital, Bethsaida Hospital, he founded into a modern health facility. Modern means operations could be carried out, anything. You get the treatment, it can even admit you, and for further treatment, those things that he did in Ethiopia to accommodate some other. Emperor set up more hospitals in Addis Ababa and in other provincial cities of the empire. He trained Ethiopian technocrats. Technocrats are experts in the field of modern medicine, which was a quick, radical move in the field of health. This was due to a desire for improving the health services of his people. In other words, the point summarizes that Emperor Haile Selassie improved on the health conditions of the Ethiopians. Diseases that were affecting them and which were curable and were killing many just before, now became no more threat to the Ethiopians. So in other words, the health conditions of the Ethiopians were improved upon, and this is a sign of improving the standard of what? Of living of the Ethiopians. Now you go to point 8. Haile Selassie modernized the Ethiopian military, or they modernized the Ethiopian army. Yes, the process of modernizing the army began in 1932. That is before we talked about the 1930 to 1931. So some of the changes he had started on them, he had embarked on them before Mussolini invaded what? Ethiopia. So in 1932, immediately after the defeat of Kojam rebellion, there was a rebellion. Kojam, these are tribal rebellions. We talked about Ethiopian being divided on tribal what? Lines. So Kojam rebellion, the modernization of the army went as fast as Ethiopian finances allowed. Selassie recruited military experts from Russia, Belgium, and Sweden to train the Ethiopian army, developed the Ethiopian Air Force, those who fight from the air. So even had the Air Force, imagine it. Can you imagine at this time, 1930s, other countries, when no country had become independent, because remember the first country to get independence was Ghana in 1957. But we're talking about 1930s, already Ethiopia had an Air Force fighting from the air. Yeah, that means it was so close with these Europeans, and because it was so close with these Europeans, he was able to get that kind of technology. So he could not only fight on land, he was not fighting using spears, arrows, like it was elsewhere on the continent. For him, he had moved those levels of the Europeans. He's fighting on the land, he's fighting in the air. So 1930s was way back. So went as far as finances, the experts from Russia, Belgium, Sweden in modern warfare technology. The French and Germans were employed to develop Ethiopian Air Force. Emperor Haile Selassie sent military cadres to military schools in Egypt. He's taking them even for further for further education in military science. France and England. Emperor Haile Selassie introduced modern military schools to train Ethiopian military generals in modern military intelligence. So you can see sincerely, this guy had moved another level. That's why Ethiopia was our pride. When all these things are taking place in Ethiopia, and if elsewhere on the continent people are getting to know that in Ethiopia they have an air force, that's why Africans elsewhere are very happy. Said yes, much as these people had colonized us, there's a country in Africa. That's why they were calling him the Lion of Judah. They were very elsewhere. Africans we are very happy when these things are taking place in Ethiopia. It because it came out to be our pride, much as we had been subjected to colonial rule, but we are also saying yes. But there is one country on the continent that these people, these whites, failed to colonize, that has the modern air force. That's why when Mussolini attacked this Ethiopia, Africans elsewhere became annoyed. 9, Emperor Haile Selassie was credited for having a liberal attitude towards religion. So he was a man who promoted freedom of worship. You can put it there, that one. Promoted freedom of worship up there. He had a belief that religion was a personal matter that belonged to all peoples of Ethiopia. To demonstrate this, Emperor Haile Selassie made imperial dominations to the church, and the mosque alike. During his regime, he supported. Now, that word, Emperor Haile Selassie made imperial donations, not dominations. You correct that word, donations, he donated. That word should read donations, not dominations. So he made imperial donations, donation to the church. Ethiopians, their church was the Orthodox Church. They believed in the Orthodox Christians, the majority of them. So donation to the church and the mosque alike, that is the Muslims also. During his regime, he supported the Ethiopian church to become completely independent from the control of the Alexandrian Patriarch Church. Patriarch is the highest rank, the highest bishop in the Orthodox Church. It's called the Patriarch. Let me hope you know those denominations. Orthodox Christianity is not the same as Catholicism. It's not the same as Protestants. You know those things. So, number 10, Emperor Haile Selassie had great love for art. He devoted most of his money and time on cultural development, especially in Amhara. Amhara is an area where there was Amhara tribe, his tribe. That's the area he was coming from. He tried to support there's a collection there with the word established. That word, he tried to support the established. It should read, he tried to support the establishment of cultural. Let me hope you're making those corrections. He tried to support the establishment, not established, of cultural music and readings in the field of philosophy, history, and religion. Little wonder that he supported the integration of history, religion. The other word, he tried to, let's go back to where that statement starts from. Haile Selassie was extremely fond of classical music. He tried to support the establishment of cultural centers in Addis Ababa and other provinces. Selassie was extremely fond of classical music and readings in the field of philosophy, history. That word is religion, not region. History and religion. Let me hope you have made that correction. And religion, comma, little wonder that he supported the integration of history, religion, and MDD in the education curriculum of Ethiopia. So the other word is religion, not region. We are moving to 11, so that is page 55. Selassie also emerged as a modernizer in the printing field, printing newspapers, typing, printing, that was called printing. He made efforts to transform the Bananena Salam, you can call it light and peace, that's what it means. Bahanena Salam. Bahanena Salam means light and peace. That was a printing press, a printing press that the printing press in two, that's how it was called, where they printing newspapers. These newspapers we read. There's a printer where those words, those letters are put there. So that's called a printer. Now it was called Bahanena Salam, or you can call it light and peace. That is the printer. That's how it was called. So he modernized it. How? Printing press into a modern printing press. He founded the press in 1923 during his days as a legend to Empress, a legend to Empress Zaditu. I don't know whether you understand the legend. Before, when there was the young king, this was now the Empress. The Empress is a lady. So at that time, she was the one at the throne. That's 1923. You remember for him, he was crowned in 1932. So there was that younger Empress he was helping to help a legend. Now he became the emperor in 1930. Whatever Haile Selassie did before 1930, he was a legend. Then in 1930, he became the emperor. Then that's like that. So let me hope you're getting those differences there. Because 1923 had not yet been crowned. His days are legend of Empress Zaditu. The press printed a Amharic newspaper with the title of Bahanena Salam. That's what the title. It had the heading like you have Book in the newspaper, like you have Vision newspaper, like you have Monitor. So the title of that newspaper was called Bahanena, which means light and peace. The newspaper published articles popularizing the cause of reforming and modernizing Ethiopia. That's in fact in this newspaper, that's where most of his programs, ideas were sold to the Ethiopians. The newspaper saw a steady flow of literature, religious and educational books in Amharic were published. So you can see the step that he did. Publishing books, publishing the press, newspapers, promoted the freedom of the press. So people were aware whatever was taking place. And next there, Emperor Haile Selassie introduced modern political structures in Ethiopia, where modern and important ministries like finance, internal and foreign affairs, health, and communication were established. Different industries, each industry, handling a different activity or different activities in the country. That was breaking down his administration, which eased his administration when you talk about the industry of health. That's to do with the health issues. Then if there was an industry, if there was any industry of, when there was a ministry of, say, of commerce and industry, that's to do with industries. Then there was a ministry of education, that is to do with the education issues. So breaking down that one made it very easy for him to carry out administration and to the advantage of the Ethiopians. So when he's breaking down, he's decentralizing. Health communication were established. The Council of Ministers was set up to strengthen administration of the empire. Haile Selassie put up a formidable civil service in Ethiopia. All these political developments elevated him to a position of a modernizer. They can sometimes ask you a question, like I've already told you, to what extent was Haile Selassie a modernizer? Whichever achievement you are talking about here makes Haile Selassie a modernizer. He brought modernity. There was modernity. Now you look at Ethiopia in 1930s and compare Uganda at that time. Compare with other areas of Africa. For them, they are fighting using Air Force. For them, they had very good infrastructure. For them, they already got, instructors, professors from those other countries. For us, we are just there starting. Remember how education started in Uganda? Started with King's College, Buldo, then there was Gayaza High School, and the only kids of the nobles, the chiefs, were the ones to attended those schools. For them, they had moved a step further. So Emperor Haile Selassie, Haile Selassie introduced a school of aviation piloting, that is the pilots, where Ethiopia trained her own pilots. You can imagine. At this time, Ethiopia had pilots, those who could fly planes, aircraft engineers and operators. By 1971, of all commercial airlines on the African continent, Ethiopian Airlines was fully offered and run by Africans. So he had Africanized. You can even look at that thing. He had Africanized even the airline. I want you to squeeze the space there to add some information on point 13. Whenever you're coming to our Zoom lessons, I expect you to come with pens, because if you're making corrections somewhere, then you also include. So in that space, I want you to squeeze this statement. Ethiopia, let me hope you're adding after the full stop. Ethiopia has one of the best airlines. Ethiopia has one of the best airlines, not only on the continent of Africa, but also in the world, but also in the whole world. Ethiopia has one of the best airlines, not only on the continent of Africa, but also in the whole world. i.e., Ethiopian airline, i.e. Ethiopian airline, i.e. the Ethiopian airline, that's what you're talking about, i.e. the Ethiopian airline. And this was founded by Selassie, the one we know today, which is the best, and was founded by Haile Selassie, and has brought a lot of foreign exchange, foreign earnings to Ethiopia. So I just wanted to show you the Ethiopian airline they are proud of today, which is one of the best. You talk to those people who move outside, who travel outside. When you hear, they comment about the good services the Ethiopian airline gives them. So that thing was started by Haile Selassie. So the Ethiopian airline, which is one of the best, to be the best airline in the world, one of the best. I'm not saying the best, but one of the best. People who travel outside, they prefer moving with Ethiopian airline. They have it provides good services generally to people who move out. There's the first class, the second class. They have those girls that, you know, serve people when the plane is up there. Services there, generally their services are very good. But before we thank Ethiopia for that, we should remember this thing was introduced by Haile Selassie. That's why we're adding that thing there. So the best airline, which is one of the things that earn a lot of foreign exchange to Ethiopia today. Ethiopia is barren, semi-arid kind of climate. Ethiopia has semi-arid kind of climate. Ethiopia is not very good for agriculture, it's mountainous. But one of the areas where Ethiopia gets a lot of money is that airline. And which airline was started by Haile Selassie. Up to now, they're enjoying. So that is the point. That's the statement I wanted to add there. And this was founded by Haile Selassie and has brought a lot of foreign earnings to Ethiopia. Let's go to our point 14. Achievement 14. The Emperor Haile Selassie introduced a 5-year development plan in which he involved foreign technocrats to assist Ethiopia in her developmental programs. These technocrats, call them experts from European countries like France, Sweden, Belgium, and Britain, as well as from USA, were example of a cardinal means something that is very important, relationship the emperor had with Europe. So he was on good terms with Europe. Emperor Haile Selassie was a diplomat. He was on good terms. Otherwise, if he was not on good terms with the Europeans, there's no way how we could have convinced the Belgians. There's no how he could have convinced the British, could have convinced the Swedish, they could have convinced the Egyptians, Syrians to come and teach these important skills to the Ethiopians. So introduced the USA, for example, and the emperor had therefore the ancient empire of Ethiopia shifted to modernity and overall progress. The ancient, the other kings, Theodore, John IV, and Menelik, for them, they had also set the pace, fine, we also credit them. But later on, he brought this, rather Haile Selassie, brought in many new modern things in Ethiopia, in different fields generally. Let's go to point number 15. He had a keen interest in all kinds of sports. In other words, Haile Selassie was a sportsman. At one time, we had a president called Amin. Amin was a sportsman. Amin participated in different sports. Boat racing, you could see Amin. Amin was a good swimmer. Swimming was not a problem to him. Amin was a motor racing. Amin also one time played football. Amin was a great boxer. In fact, a boxer who even one time represented, before he became the president, who one time represented Uganda in the boxing area. So he was a sportsman. So was this Emperor Haile Selassie. He was a sportsman. And being a sportsman, that's why he promoted sports. Okay. 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 Let us continue with that point 15. He had a keen interest in all kinds of sports, although with a personal bias in tennis. For him, okay, preferred tennis, horseback riding and hunting. Those were his areas of preference. He facilitated sports such as during his regime, Ethiopia produced outstanding sportsmen and women, including the legendary Abebe, a successful long distance runner. For your information, via sports, in sports today, even up to now, Ethiopia is one of the countries in the whole world that is known for producing long distance runners. Hope you know the long distance running. These days also Uganda is coming up. At one time you had the Chiprotich, and then you have today's what? There's that man, the long distance runner, who's now the best. And in fact, there was a man called Bekele. Bekele was an Ethiopian. He had put there a record, which what is this man of ours? Forgotten the name. He has taken out, he has stopped that record. So the long distance runners that Ethiopia is happy about today, that work was started by Haile Selassie. Like we talked about, the best airline Ethiopians are proud of today, the best airline they are proud of today, we said it was started by Haile what? Selassie. So the long distance runners we know today in Ethiopia, that work was started by this great man. So I want you to add something, a line just on point 15. Point 15, I want you to add something there. After the long distance runner, full stop. Ethiopia is known in the whole world as a country. Ethiopia is known in the whole world as a country that has produced the best long distance runners. In Ethiopia is known the whole world as a country, is known in the whole world as a country that has produced the best long distance runners. The work that was started by Haile Selassie. So you can see, up to now, those fruits of Haile Selassie's leadership are still being enjoyed by the Ethiopians. Let me hope you have added that statement there. Let's go to point 16. Haile Selassie is remembered for his attitude and care for the unfortunate and unprivileged. So he was a kind guy. He promoted charity. Hardly a day could pass without him visiting hospitals, orphanages, and institutions of disabled. He put some of his earnings in the disposal fund to help those needy ones, which was charged with planning and administering institutions of the poor and the sick. In other words, he promoted charity in Ethiopia. He shared the pain of those ones who were disabled. In fact, so you can see how he was. So he's a guy who promoted charity in Ethiopia. So he did not only look at the other side of leadership, but even looked at those people who could not help themselves, and he helped them. And that is a very good gesture that Haile Selassie did. On that, Haile Selassie is remembered for his attitude and care. No, that's when we are finished. Let's go to point 17. Emperor Haile Selassie had love for nature. Had love for nature. despite of his aging life. Aging, I think there is I missing there. Aging, rather, E-I-N-G. Let me hope you have made that correction. Aging. The emperor found time to rest with his petties that included the horses. He loved animals, in other words. He loved the animals. At his home, there were dogs. He used to move his birds. At home, there are birds, the parrots. You know those birds? There are those birds that are domesticated. Yeah? So he loved the birds, loved the dogs, loved the horses, cats. You know, he kept about 13 lions, you can imagine, 13 in his Addis Ababa palace. You know, some lions can be tamed, can be domesticated. Yeah, and can be friendly, especially if you handle them from childhood, from being the baby, being babies, from the childhood. So you can tame them as long as they don't simply learn on the what? The old ones. So there are those ones which can be domesticated. They can imagine he had 13 of them at his palace, together with many horses and parrots. Excuse me. This was an indication of modern care for nature during his private life. So during his private life, he could joke along, could joke with those animals. So he's a man who loved nature. So during 18, that's 18, let's go to 18. During his regime, Emperor Haile Selassie succeeded in securing and maintaining the Ethiopian seat in the League of Nations. In other words, during his time, he made Ethiopia become the member of the League of Nations. We're talking about the League of Nations was formed in 1920. And it was the only country on the continent, you can imagine. And it was the only country on the continent that he was a member, of course, being the independent. So he made Ethiopia, and internationally, that's meant, that's 1924, during his reign. As a legend, I told you, from before 1930, he's known as a legend, helping the other empress. Then 1930 is emperor, because remember we talked about him crowned. He was crowned as an emperor, 1930. Before that, he's a legend looking after. In most cases, there was, I don't know whether you remember your O level, there was King Chua. Chua was very young by the time his daddy died, and he had to be with legends, those who helped him. Yeah? When there is an empress, this one's an empress. When the empress takes over the throne, when she is too young, there should be people around, all the people around who can help. So you call them legends. You get a point? So as a legend, that one should not confuse you. Anything he did before 1930, legend. Anything after 1930, emperor. This enabled Ethiopia to interact with major European powers like France and Britain at the same level. It enabled Ethiopia to participate in influential decisions of international level. Being part of the League of Nations also proved that Selassie had a great desire to promote Ethiopian foreign affairs relations. That is, the League provided him with a valuable platform on the efforts to defend his country against the fascist Italian attack, which greatly threatened Ethiopian independence. So there are many things that Ethiopia benefited from as a member of what? Of the League of Nations. And it is partly because of that we are going to see this man in 1941. That's Mussolini just out. 19, as a sign of concern of humanity, the leader of Ethiopia supported the opening up of the Ethiopian branch of Red Cross. In our paper 3, the topic, in fact, paper 3, where you are with Mr. Ampli, that topic is called Ottoman Empire. It's called the Ottoman Empire. In that Ottoman Empire, one of the areas you come across was something called the Crimean War. The Crimean War was 1854-56. Red Cross, which we know today as Red Cross, the Red Cross Society we know today, was formed after this war. So it was formed after 1856. Red Cross is an humanitarian organization. Yeah? During this Crimean War, many soldiers on both sides. This is the war you shall get to know. It was between Russia on one side fought against Turkey, fought against Britain, fought against France, and there will be also small penny Italian states in that Crimean War. And it so happened this combined the force of the three defeated Russia. But during this war, the side of Russia and the side of these other countries, many soldiers were wounded. An idea came up from that. There was an English lady who came up with an idea during this war. Many people were wounded. That's why it's called the most useless war ever fought in the history of what? So an idea was brought that if we can get the wounded soldiers in the battlefield very fast, immediately, and they get treatment, immediate treatment, which you call first aid. That lady is the one who brought that idea. We can save lives of those people. An idea was brought by that lady that if you can quickly get these wounded soldiers, take them for treatment, we can save their lives. And it worked. Many of those wounded soldiers during the Crimean War, their lives were saved. This is the coming in of the so-called Red Cross. So Red Cross was brought around 1856. For Muslim countries, they call it Red Crescent. For Christians, hope you know what crescent, the sign of crescent. That's the shape of that moon. It's called a crescent. It's one of the symbols of Muslim. This is what we call the crescent. Then the Red Cross, for Christians. So the Christians have their symbol, Red Cross. If you look at the top of the churches, you will see that element. If you look at the top of the mosques, you will see the crescent. Sometimes also Muslims have the stars. Those are their symbols. So they have the stars and the crescent. So today we have Red Crescent. If you go to Arab countries, you will see those vehicles with that sign of crescent in Iraq, so those kind of. So what this man did, the Red Cross, which was started way back in Europe, he became a member. That's the point. I was just giving a background how the Red Cross thing came about. You shall get the details. You shall get the details when it comes to that paper 6. In fact, where you are is Mr. Amplide. That's called the Ottoman Empire. You come across what they call the Crimean War, and that's the starting point of the Red Cross we are talking about here. So we are saying a sign of human Ethiopia branch of Red Cross. The Red Cross, which was international, set up a branch in Ethiopia. And the Red Cross does not necessarily only help in wars, time of wars. It also helps in times of famine. It can be in times of disaster. The Red Cross, those Red Cross things. Yes. The emperor was impressed by the support given by the Red Cross to the victims of the Italian aggression and occupation of Ethiopia. That means during that time, many Ethiopians were wounded, and this Red Cross came in to assist. And that's how we allowed them to open up a branch, internationalized now Ethiopia. Between 1935 to 19, he thereafter gave the body permanent premises, you can imagine. That means whenever any disaster could hit Ethiopia, not necessarily the war, any disaster, floods, any disaster could hit, these Red Cross members were there to help the Ethiopians. That's what it means. You give them a permanent office, you are bringing their services near to the Ethiopians. In any case there was any disaster, Ethiopians could benefit from these people. Other Ethiopians could even end up working, employed by the Red Cross. So there are many benefits that this man did by bringing what? The Red Cross. Rather by giving the Red Cross a permanent office. Ethiopians, hence, he therefore gave a permanent premise, gave the body permanent premises in Ethiopia to continue with their humanitarian work towards the Ethiopian people. In other words, the Ethiopian people benefited out of this Red Cross branch, which had its permanent existence, which had its permanent premises in where? In Ethiopia. Okay, let's go to 21. I think it is 20. His international popularity led to the invitation of Ethiopia as one of the founder members of the United Nations, 1945. Remember, he made Ethiopia a member of the League of Nations. That is great. We have looked at it. At the same time, in 1945, remember 1945, the loan collapsed. And when the loan collapsed, there came the what? The UN. So he graduated, he made Ethiopia also become a member In 1945, no country had become independent on the continent of Africa. And in 1945, he had come back from exile. So by the time the World War II ended, that's 1945, he came back from exile in 1941. When the World War II broke out, that was the end of the League of Nations. So he's graduating, he's moving Ethiopia now from the loan which had collapsed to the UNO. Again, internationalizing Ethiopia, making the Ethiopia to be known internationally. So this made the Ethiopian empire not only popular, but also a major contributor to international peace and security. Hence, because of Emperor Haile Selassie, his country became part of the determining powers of modern world affairs. So you can hear that, modern world affairs. Issues to discuss security and peace in the whole world. Ethiopia is a member there. So that's why Africans were very happy and looking at Ethiopia as their pride. We are very happy about that. At a certain time, we shall look at the OAU. That's why the Organization of African Unity that was formed in 1963. We shall see Africans. In 1963, many countries had become independent. In 1963, even Uganda had got her independence because we got ours in 1960 what? 1962. In 1963, when the OAU was formed, that continental organization, all Africans pointed at Ethiopia and said, no, Ethiopia should be our headquarters. That's why the OAU ended up having its headquarters in Addis Ababa. So it was our pride. If you read about these things, much as Africans were suffering elsewhere on the continent, were being subjected to colonial rule, their land was being grabbed. They were at least saying, yes, you are doing this to us, but there is the Lion of Judah that you feared to tamper with. So that is the issue. 20th, now we are talking about Haile Selassie promoted the Pan-Africanism. 21st, Haile Selassie promoted the Pan-Africanism through emphasizing continental unity in Africa. So Haile Selassie did not only look at Ethiopia, he looked beyond the borders of Ethiopia. Someone who loves his country is a nationalist, but someone who goes further and loves African race and African elsewhere is a Pan-Africanist. In other words, Haile Selassie was a nationalist at the same time as a Pan-Africanist. He looked beyond what was happening elsewhere on the continent became his concern, especially at this time when there was that issue of colonization. His constructive influence was seen when he worked with Nkrumah of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, and Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt to reconcile the Casablanca and Monrovian groups. We shall talk about these two groups, Monrovian and Casablanca. Casablanca is the capital, at this time it was the capital city of Morocco. And Monrovia was and is still the capital city of Liberia. So there are some African nationalists. Those ones who are radical, those who wanted to form one government on the whole continent, which they wanted to call USA. That idea was brought by Kwame Nkrumah, the USA, United States of Africa. Those people were the one called Casablanca. Now there are those ones who are liberal against the idea. Some African nationalists were against the idea. Those ones called the Monrovian, they were a bit liberal. For them, they feared to lose their promised areas of prominence. One of them was Julius Nyerere. Julius Nyerere belonged to the Monrovian group or was against the idea simply because those people of the Monrovian group were fearing to lose their positions of leadership. This is where Nyerere came up with a statement and said, I would rather remain a big fish in a smaller pond than becoming a smaller fish in the big pond. Nyerere was against the idea of Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is a guy who advocated for creating one state, one country, one government. A whole continent would be just, it would be kind of federal, but it would be one, like USA today. It's a very big country, but it's one country, but it has those other states. So we'll be calling ourselves the state of Uganda, the state of Tanzania, state of Malawi. But when you have one president, the whole continent, that's what was all embedded in the idea of what? USA. So we shall get the details. We shall get the details of who are the Casablanca, who are the Monrovian groups, groupings leading to the formation. Those two later on reconciled. Those who are in the idea of USA and those who were against in 1963, they agreed to form something that both groups accepted, which was called the Organization of African Unity. This was a memorable